everyone. Today we're going to be going over paper 1 and mainly about how to analyze an unseen text and build a guiding argument. Imagine a doctor walks into a consultation room and the patient presents with a rash, a fever, and a cough. And the doctor could say, there's a rash, there's a fever, there is a cough. Technically, that is accurate. But that is not medicine. It's just a list. And a list, it kind of tells you what is present. The diagnosis tells you what those symptoms are doing together and what they reveal about an underlying condition. And so paper 1 operates with the same logic. The text is the patient, the techniques, the syntax, the imagery, the structure, the voice. These are all presenting the symptoms of the patient. And so what that does is identifying the deeper condition that is underneath, and it produces a sustained claim about what the text is working to achieve. So the important distinction here is that you're not hunting for techniques, but you are hunting for patterns. One technique is appearing once, that's kind of an observation, and then maybe the same kind of technique appearing multiple times, 2 or 3 times, it could be a pattern. The writer is making a deliberate decision, right? So your job is basically to ask, what is the decision in service of? We're going to take a look at Toni Morrison. So take a moment to read it once. So 3 times in these sentences. So Morrison is assigning an emotional state to a number, to maybe a building, an address, and someone like reading very quickly might notice the first one and then write, Morrison personifies a house. But this, I would say, it's an observation, right? But even if it is the exact right observation, stopping there means that the examiner cannot tell whether you actually understood this text or not. Let's try to move more from an observation to an interpretation. You would kind of start by asking, okay, who or what normally carries this kind of state? Spite, venom, grief, they are, I would say, quite internal, and these are things that you feel. So now ask yourself, okay, why has Morrison moved them out of the inside and to the outside? Once you kind of ask that question, the answer kind of starts to form. So perhaps maybe the trauma is so large that it cannot be contained by one person, and that is an interpretation, and it is what you are being rewarded for. So before we read a full passage, I want to show you something. So one sentence from McCarthy, cold yellow eye, dead to the blue vault above them. A common response I see when students are just starting out is something like, the writer uses an unusual sentence structure. Sentence does not follow normal grammatical rules, right? And I would say that is worth registering. But observation stops at the surface. It tells the examiner nothing beyond what they could see with their own eyes. The examiner has already read the sentence. And so repeating what it does at the most basic level adds on not much to their understanding of it. Students who've kind of been taught to link technique to effect often write something like this one. It's better. There is a technique named, an effect is attached, but look at the effect. Stark, unsettling tone. They say nothing specific about the hawk. So when an examiner reads, create a stark tone, they cannot tell whether the student actually kind of sat with the sentence and thought about it carefully, or whether they spotted a technique and reached for the nearest available adjective. It kind of reads like a formula, right? Because formulas you can apply to any text. So they don't really demonstrate that the student understood this one. That is why generic effect labels do not earn marks at the higher levels. They look like comprehension, but not analysis. And so here's the question that kind of changes everything, which is, why is there no verb? What does a verb do or give a sentence that this one refuses to have? A verb gives a subject, something to do, right? So it gives a creature agency, movement, life, and this hawk spent its entire existence in motion. And so now there's no verb. So the hawk kind of has been reduced to a single part. And notice McCarthy does not write its I. He strips the possessive entirely, and the hawk no longer owns anything. And so the phrase dead to, it does not seem, or it does not just mean lifeless. It's kind of implying some kind of severed relationship. And when you read it that way, the sentence is not creating a tone, right? Think of it this way. A verb gives a living thing a relationship with the world, right? It gives it a little bit of breath, life. It acts, it hunts, it moves, it belongs somewhere. Strip the verb, and you strip all of that I just explained. So what you are left with, a noun, a sky that can no longer be reached. It is enacting what death removes. When you write evaluatively, your verb kind of does half the work. If you say the writer shows, tells the examiner almost nothing about the intent, but McCarthy severs, or McCarthy refuses, or each of those kind of already contain a judgment about what the writing is doing and why. That is kind of what you are trying to signal at the examiner, so that you are evaluating, not just describing. And all of this needs to sit inside one argument. So think back to the doctors. One diagnosis, not 4 separate observations. So every paragraph should be kind of pointing in the same direction. This passage is from McCarthy's novel. The narrator is Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, just to give you a little bit of context. So he's like this aging Texas law enforcer who is increasingly out of step, out of touch with the violence that he is encountering in the county that he was assigned to. And this is a pretty quiet scene, and Bell is driving back from a crime scene. When you read, pay attention to the 3 things, which is what Bell is doing with his body, and what the syntax does with the action, and how the passage shifts between Bell's present and the hawk's past. Okay, so this was the line that we were looking at earlier, but just take a moment to read through the whole passage. Just to take note, there's also the guiding question here. So let's say this is the guiding question. I read for the overall feel. So how do I arrive at it? Look at the sentence lengths, what Bell actually does, what is never said directly, maybe. The sentences are quite short and declarative. He gets out of the car, he walks back, he squats, he raises one wing and lets it fall. In this scene, we don't get much of what's going on inside Belle's head. So he moves the hawk off the road so the trucks will not run over it. Nobody asked him to do that, right? Nobody is watching him either in this scene. And that quiet attention to something that's small and dead without any commentary is how the tenderness of this character is registered. What I want to start noticing is patterns. I want to look for patterns. So if you look at the sentence structure in the first paragraph, he pulled over, he got out, he walked back, he squatted, he looked, he raised, he let it fall. And each action is its own complete unit. There is no because, no and then, and no explanation connecting them. And this is a very deliberate choice. And that makes every action kind of carry the same weight. So stopping for a dead bird gets the same syntactic space as the act of driving. So now, if you look at the second paragraph, it says, here it is, lost in the concentration of the hunter, he wouldn't have the trucks running over it. These are not complete sentences either. There is no subject, no Belle. The fragments belong to the hawk's living self. And then the form kind of performs the content. So what the hawk was is now fractured. It's broken on the page as it is in reality. So those were some of the patterns that we've pointed out. And now, so take a moment to read this. So a few things that are worth pointing out here. So McCarthy is the grammatical subject here. So the sentence is always about what the writer is doing. So it's not simply what happens in the text. The verb enacts already contains a judgment, right? It says the writer performs something. So now the claim that the sentence is making is Belle raising the wing and letting it fall, explain even to himself. Like, it's not something that Belle can think through or explain. McCarthy gives us kind of no interiority here, I would say. So there's no internal monologue. There's no stated emotion, as I mentioned earlier, and the tenderness exists entirely in the physical act. That is exactly why elaboration would betray the moment. Let's say like McCarthy wrote, Belle felt a deep sadness as he raised the wing. The power of the moment is that it is not explained because the kind of care it describes, it doesn't really come with explanation, is the whole point. And so the form, the short sentences, no internal monologue, no comment, it's what makes the content land. How do we structure the response? I think that's a common question that arises. And for both SL and HL, there are three components, which is introduction, body, and conclusion. So let's just quickly talk about the concrete framework for it. So the introduction, it's not a summary of a text and it's not a warm-up. So it's like the first thing that the examiner reads. So they are immediately asking, does this student know what they are arguing? So a strong introduction is kind of brief and ends with your guiding argument. Name the thematic territory of the text. One or two sentences do not philosophize. So like, for example, someone says, throughout history, humanity has grappled with the impossibility of escaping the past. could sit above any essay ever written. So that is not an introduction. Writer type, text type, show the examiner you know what kind of text this is. These two can be handled in a single sentence. Writer, text type, ear, purpose. What is it trying to do to the reader? Disturb them, build sympathy, provoke. So pick the one that matters for your argument and embed it naturally rather than just listing it. And then row 4, so bridge, a phrase that pivots into your argument through this lens accordingly. So these are kind of examples. Something that kind of makes the move from context to analysis feel deliberate. You want to try to implement. So this is the bridge. It is the part that a lot of people often skip. So without the introduction, it feels like it stops and then restarts. Just one phrase like this, it's enough. And if you look at row 5, so guiding argument, your interpretive claim, precise, arguable, specific to this text. The guiding argument is the most important sentence in the whole response. Another reader could disagree with it. And specific to this text, specific meaning like it belongs to this text, not any text. If you could paste your guiding argument into a different essay about a different passage, then, and it would still work, then it is not specific enough. If you spend 3 or 4 sentences setting up the historical background before you have said anything analytical, you have already used a significant portion of the time that they are willing to spend orienting themselves through your writing. So try to keep the framing tight to get to your claim. And the body paragraph structure. So the structure overview is kind of just there mostly, so you have a sense of proportion. So each paragraph needs to be kind of built around a single textual moment and not a technique in general, but a specific word or phrase or sentence that you can quote. From there, you can name what the technique is and run through the 3 levels that we went over earlier. And you arrive at an interpretation that could only apply to this text. The phrase to kind of hold on to is depth over coverage. So the examiner is not counting how many techniques you found. They are rather asking whether you understood any of them well enough to actually say something true about the text. And most students use the conclusion to repeat what they have already said. But honestly, it is your chance to kind of reach outward, to connect the specific text to a larger human question. If you look at row 3, synthesize, not summarize, pull threads into one larger statement, no listing. This is the row that most students ignore. So summarizing means, in my first paragraph, I discussed this hawk imagery. In my second, I discussed the syntax. In my third, I discussed the fragments. You have just listed your own essay back at yourself. But the examiner already read those paragraphs, right? Synthesizing rather means asking, okay, now that I've shown all of this, what does it add up to? What is the single larger thing these 3 observations together reveal about what the writer is doing and why? That is, I think, a harder question, and answering it in the conclusion is what makes it a lot more complex. So this is where the top marks may happen. The reach outward is where this criterion A lives. So the text is always about something specific, right? So in our case, it was the hawk, Toni Morrison, the house, a woman. So what is in service of is always something larger. So in our case, grief, mortality, right? The way the past kind of refuses to stay in the past. Your conclusion is where you make that connection explicit. Not by abandoning the text, but asking, why does this specific moment in this specific text matter beyond the page? That question is totally worth practicing, because the answer to this is what separates a good conclusion from a great one. Okay, so practice that one. So one practical thing, read your last sentence out loud so that you kind of register it in your head. So if it trails off, if it is repeating something that you've already said, if it ends on a weak note, like weak qualifier, I suggest to rewrite it. The examiner's last impression of you is this, right? So make it count. Just to conclude, Paper 1 is not a technique hunt. It is an argument. The students who score in the upper band are not the ones who are the best at treasure hunting for the devices, the most devices, but they are the ones who have something specific to say about what the text is doing. You got to fall in love with your text, even if you don't want to. Fake it until you make it. Who trusts that argument all the way through should be you, so believe in yourself. And that is it.